Hi, my name is Clayton Younkin. I am the creator, writer, director of Neon Lights, and today we are doing a very special behind-the-scenes episode. Today I'm joined by one person without whom this show could never exist, and that is my dear friend, Robert Macneill. So Robert, tell us a little bit about your involvement in this project, what exactly it is that you do.
I am the sound guy. Because in a lot of things, there's like you have the sound mixer, you have the sound master, you have the recorder, the boom mic operator, the lav operator. I was all those people. I recorded every bit of sound, and then I'm also the Foley artist. So I'm just the sound guy.
The sound guy, and I am grateful to have you on board with this project. So talk a little bit about your past experiences with sound design. How did you get involved in sound? And what keeps you working in sound?
Got me started in sound was working with bands in high school, doing their mix tables and stuff like that. Then I just remember wandering on a set when I was in Alabama. It was a student film set, and a guy was like, "Hey man, you want to hold this boom pole?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then it was just kind of like, it was interesting that so much was reliant on making sure you got room tone, make sure you got all these very special things. And it just kind of snowballed from there, that it just kind of became obsessed, and like then just started noticing sound, and being the only person in my friend group that, like, when there was two different sound categories at the Oscars, being like, I can tell you what the difference is between the sound mixing category and the sound editing category, and like very different than what those two things are.
It's definitely something that people that aren't aware of what goes into sound don't necessarily appreciate, because when you watch a movie or a TV show, you need the visual and the audio component, and the audio is just as important, if not more important at times, than the visual.
Right. And a great example of that is, and as bad, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and in the worst Star Wars movie, which is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, there is the absolute best bit of sound mixing, and that is during the seismic charge that Jango Fett sends out trying to find Obi-Wan, how it takes almost a negative sound energy, and you know it was impactful because friends of mine that were managing movie theaters at the time would tell me that people came in like, there's something wrong with your soundtrack, but no, that's how it was supposed to happen. So to cause that kind of reaction is kind of what the big goal is. You want people to go like, oh my gosh, I heard this weird thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
any other particular movie or TV show references that you like in terms of sound design or mixing?
Oh my gosh, I mean the obvious ones are like Psycho, the Janet Leigh scene, a lot of slasher stuff. But for this project, I took a lot from old martial arts movies. I absolutely, and the worse the better, because you would have, and not because they relied so much more on Foley work. So if you watch like Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee's not making these connections. If you're watching Bloodsport, none of these guys are making these very obvious hits, but you can hear what they did to make that sound, and that always just like, okay, this gives me that idea.
So you mentioned Foley work. Can you describe what that is for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah. So when you hear people walking on film, you're not hearing that actor walk. And when you hear people hitting, you're not hearing those two people hitting each other. You're hearing somebody in a little room filled with mics, kind of like Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, banging coconuts together and make the horse sound. And that's kind of what it is. So like, okay, I have this person gets hit, cool. I'm gonna hit 3 chicken breasts with a meat tenderizer, and that's the sound that it's gonna make.
So you have one person in the room watching the clips, making the sound effects.
Yes.
And go into. Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
So what was your interest in getting involved with this project in particular? Was it the story, the script, the actors?
Um, Honestly, it was just because of you, man. I'm a big proponent of don't ask why, ask why not. So, and I love the idea of people dreaming big, because another thing I say is if you don't dream big, what's the use of dreaming? And you told me about it, and I was like, oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I told you, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. And then you came in and you're like, hey man, I really need a sound recordist. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, of course I could do that, man. And that's just how it went. And I remember early on, though, you handed me the scripts, and obviously it was in digital form. But and when I looked at it, I said, this dude's just giving me a novel. Like you wrote like 500 something pages, and I'm just like, okay, cool. But there was no exposition, there was none of that. It was just 500 pages of dialogue. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And I remember asking, I was like, this is good writing. I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't have that frame of reference.
Sure.
And so that was what that was.
And I think that was one of my biggest mistakes from a writer's perspective, because when I was writing it, I wanted the actors to focus solely on the dialogue and not have to stop and pause to read any directions or exposition or things that were happening. But also it would have been a great frame of reference for them. But I knew going into the recording space that I would be there to explain and say, hey, this is what is happening in this scene. This is where you are, to give that direction. But I'm sure in hindsight, that would have been a great frame of reference for you.
Yeah.
No. So you talked about the script, over 500 pages, 49 episodes. Have you ever worked on something with this amount of magnitude or scope before?
No, yes and no. I did really, really long time ago. I did a series of I guess it would be podcast now, but it wasn't. It was for NPR, and it was through and it was extending universes of different like cult TV shows. And so I was a sound engineer on that, and I didn't really think anything of it. I just but no, nothing like 49 episodes of one thing where there needs to be continuity. No, nothing of that magnitude.
And not only that, but we knocked these 49 episodes out in 4 days, and here we are, almost a year later, still. So we are almost to that finish line, or at least you are, as far as no. So what was it like that first day of recording? What were some of the challenges or issues that you encountered throughout that recording session on day one?
So there was a bit of a mix. I remember driving into the parking garage, and I just have my totes and my different bits of equipment that I needed, and I always had this going on set, whether I was doing something voiceover related, where I'd be in a booth the whole day, or if I was doing something in person where I'm miking up people and doing boom work, is you never know what you're gonna get with your heads of department. And so you don't really know what their reaction was or what their style was like. I didn't have that because I had known you and I'd worked with you and I'd seen you do plays before. And I was like, okay, this is the Clayton that I'm gonna see. I'm gonna see like it's 3 days before competition day, Clayton. That's what I'm gonna see. And then I got there and we set everything up and got room tones and all that stuff. And then the actors started showing up, and then I was like, oh gosh, we're doing this for real. And then I just started thinking like, I really wish the space was bigger. I really wish this was happening, this was happening, this was happening, but we're not. So let me figure out how to make the best of this. And that's what I've done my best to do.
Yeah. And I think, considering our confines and circumstances, I think you've done a tremendous job. So you talked about all the actors coming into the space. Voice acting is normally a solitary affair where you have a person in a booth, and you have your mixer, whomever, off to the side, getting all the recording stuff done. But in this instance, I wanted to go a different route, and I looked at one of my biggest inspirations, who is Andrea Romano, who is a voice director for years and years and years on most of the shows that I watched growing up, probably a lot of the same ones you watched as well. And I watched an interview with her, and one of the things she said that was super impactful to me was that if you have the opportunity to get all of your actors in the same room at the same time, do it. And so that was one of the biggest things that I wanted to do. So talk a little bit about the pros and cons, because for Act 1 of the show, we had some minor roles that voiced in remotely, but for the bulk of the show, all of our actors were in the same room at the same time. So what are some of the pros and cons of that from a sound engineer standpoint, especially in this post-COVID world where you have, by that point, the vaccine hadn't even rolled out yet.
Right. Oh yeah. We were masked up the whole time, gloved up. Oh my gosh. The biggest con of it is that you can't get like a single line reading over and over. Let me get this one. I want to hit you. Give me 4 options for this one line. Okay, cool. We're going to go on to the next line, and then just move on to that. And that's helpful because, and that's why with the people that were done remotely, I have had so much less of an issue because you don't have people picking up on other people's mics. And so you're just like, oh, okay, this is easy. I have 4 options for this line reading. Cool, I'll put it in the best one, the one that makes sense for it. Versus you have everyone going, well, when this character's talking, I pick them up on this mic. And so it ended up teaching me by the end of Act 2, I completely changed the way that I had been doing voice editing, like audio editing, that I've done for the last almost 20 years now. So I completely changed the way I do it to fit this new style, where I realized, well, if they're always just going to talk over each other, like normally what you would do is you would take this clip for this sound, put it in there, adjust it, and then go to the next person and just keep doing it that way. And then you build it from there. You like Frankenstein monster it. Well, you had already given it to me for the most part, pretty much built, but I was still in the world of, no, you cut everything out and then you place it all together. And so that's what caused some of our early issues, where it was like, I'm hearing this person on another person's track, and then I have to go back in there and try to bounce those parts of the track. But I found that if I do it this other way, where I really just scrub the track with the exception of when that character is talking, then I hear the performance that I heard in the room that day, and it's so much better. And then I can add other little like hits and things back and forth during that.
Sure. So what would you say are some of the pros of having them all in the same space together too?
I mean, obviously, you have the chemistry that you get on a film set. You get the people joking around after takes. You get people starting to grow in their characters. A lot of the times with doing remote stuff and doing one actor at a time, you don't have true you have a character growth, but you don't have a group growing together. So because you recorded this thing linearly, we started with Act 1 and we went all the way to Act 5. By the time that they got to the later acts, they had become the friends that they were playing. And that was huge versus if you were to do it, had everyone shown up individually, it would have been, they would have had to build their own arc, but you wouldn't have been able to see the group come together the same way that they did.
Right. I think for me, that was the big thing, is that with Act 1, they all start as strangers. And so that actually worked in the recording session because for the most part, none of these actors had known each other before. Some of them had worked together prior, but for the most part, they were complete strangers. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. They went on this journey together, and they got to learn to play off of each other, and they could anticipate what the other actors were going to be doing with their characters. And I think that lent to a more natural dialogue.
Yeah.
So what was it like after we left the recording space and you started building these episodes together? How did you go about finding the right sounds to create this world? What goes into building constant episodes?
So a lot of it came from when I started out. I said, okay, I need location shots. I need base locations, and the one that gave me the best, where I didn't start, but I built the locations for each of the 7 sectors, was Teo's prologue, because he goes through every sector. And I was like, okay, so I was able to think, okay, what is this about? He describes it in a way. And then I would read all their internal monologues and try to, okay, here are so I'm making notes, what all this stuff's at. So you have, the sticks that are one way. You have, Neo Tokyo or Neo Chinatown, that is this other way. So I was like, okay, well, let me find sounds. Let me find groupings of sounds. So all these background noises that are there only to make sure it feels lived in. So you have vendors and stuff. Well, that's, people, saying things in, because I figured Neo Chinatown would have kind of like where Bruce Willis was at the start of Fifth Element, where he's at that point. So or the start of a lot of them where there's a mixture of Asian cultures.
Yeah.
So I reached out to friends of mine who spoke different languages and just had them pretend that they were on a street and order things. So you have a little bit of Japanese, you have Chinese, you have Taiwanese, you have Korean, and all of those language, and it's just them saying nothing. It's just them talking, and so there's these layers in there, and I put that into one. Going out to downtown Houston and just picking up traffic sounds, because every place has traffic, and things like that. I thought that was really important, because if you don't believe that they're at some place, the place feels dead. And then to that end, when we're in Arc Tower, that was a place that, especially at the beginning, I wanted to feel dead. I wanted it to feel very, very sterile. Yes. And so there was almost nothing to it. There was a sound, but the sound was like, I want to say an air conditioning hum, but really low. Like, what else would you have? And so it's little things like that you start building up. And so then you make these bases for everything, for all the different sectors and all the different location shots. And then as you go on, you're like, okay, here's a new location shot. Let me build this location. Well, okay, in my mind, what does this look like? And some of this is me emailing you, hey, man, what does this look like in your head? And then it's, okay, I get it. And then I start very much at the background, and then I put in the characters' voices, and then I try to decide, okay, are they stepping on rocks, or are they having to push aside a box, because that's the sound I need to find and make.
You talked a little bit about Arc Tower sounding, empty and sterile, and I think, that's one of the locations that goes on its own journey, because as it comes together, if you see in later episodes, you've built that sound, and it's grown, and it's more warm and friendly, because this team of heroes comes together. So about how long would you estimate, and I know you said you've changed the way you've done it from Act 2 into Act 3, but about how long does it take you to build one episode?
Between 10 and 15 hours.
Wow. So what are some of the challenges or obstacles you face in post-production with that?
Some of them are super like, you could tell that we were on a time crunch. I could tell when you broke for meal, because when we came back from meal, I noticed the actors were saying things differently. They had a different voice. And so then I'm like, okay, well, let me figure out a way to tweak this back to the voice that they had. And then they get into their voice, and okay, let me take away that tweak. Then there were other things. The other things, it's just like, okay, you say there's this big fight scene, and this is what I remember. They're fighting in this thing, and I was like, okay, cool. And so I built this giant fight scene in my head. I mentioned watching Bloodsport, and I was like, I'm going to Bloodsport route. This is going to be these hardcore. And you send me an email back like, I can't animate what you just did. And I was like, oh, right. I totally, like, I get lost in my own little world of audio. Like, oh, whatever I put in there, they're going to be able to do. So, and that's weird. So having to go, okay, so here's how fast they can move. And once again, I'm going back to Star Wars. In the novelization of Episode 3, the Emperor, whenever the Jedis are coming in to arrest the Emperor is described as moving faster than any of the Jedis had ever seen. But in the actual movie, he's pretty slow. And so then it's just like, okay, this is as fast as it could go, because this is how fast really like the eye could take. Like, shooting at 24 frames per second, or even if they bumped it up to 60 frames per second, this is as fast as they could go. So you have to shoot it like people can see it. It's no good to be a blur to get all the action that needs to happen. And so it was kind of like, okay, well, here's how fast things can happen. And then also you have the problem with you can give too much audio. You can be like, okay, you tell me a battle scene and there's chaos going on. Well, I want to put as much chaos going on, and then I get so excited about the background that I just really forget that this is a character story. And so it is kind of important to hear what they have to say.
On occasion. So what was it from reading the script to then hearing the recording performance and then seeing the final product? That align kind of with how you saw it? Were there things where like, oh, I didn't expect it to look like that, or?
It was at the very first time you showed me the first cut of Writer's Prologue. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it. And so from then on, I was like, I get what we're doing now. But doing it in a total vacuum was just so, and by the time that you had given me writer's prologue, I was already a quarter of the way into act 2, because it's just how post-production works. Like, I'm going at my own pace and you're doing your thing, and it doesn't line up. Just kind of like if we were shooting this week to week, like it would still be what they shoot 4 weeks ago is what we get to see next week. Like there's all those layers in that with television. So it's stuff like that.
Yeah. So kind of shift gears a little bit. I know we have a lot of perspective or hopeful voice actors that follow our show on our Instagram. Is there, from a sound engineer, sound mixer standpoint, is there any advice you would give them in regards to pursuing voice acting, or what to do or not to do in a booth?
Yes. Don't try to level yourself. Figure out how you're going to talk, and then let me level you, because I have everyone else's levels in my head. So if you're talking at one level, and yes, obviously, if something's intense, you're going to raise your voice. I want you obviously to still act, but if you come in very mousy and okay, cool, and then you just talk really loudly, I'm like, well, you've ruined my entire level. If you do anything remote, the absolute best thing I can tell you to do is to go into something, a small place with padding, like a closet or something like that. Turn off as much electronics as you can, and invest in a good microphone. A good microphone. It doesn't have to. I'm not talking like, you don't need to get like a Shure microphone, like these $400, $500, $600 microphones, but a simple $50 to $80 microphone is good enough to where, yeah, they can work with you. And if you give it to them in the way that they ask you. So if they ask you for it in M4A or WAV or MP3, give them it to it in that state, because there's a reason they've asked for it in that state.
That's some great advice. So with our voice actors, you in the editing process have to listen to some of these lines or episodes 50, 60 times just to get it just right. Is there any particular voice actor on our cast that you could just listen to over and over again and never get tired of hearing?
Absolutely. There's one at the beginning that pretty much the entire way that it is just, I find it almost like just a calming bath, and it's writer's voice. I just find it just so like, oh, just everything he says. And it may be the military person in me that just finds it just very authoritative and something like that. I don't know what it is about his voice, but he never, anytime it's on, he's just like, yep, I feel better hearing him. Yeah. Later on, there are some other ones that kind of like, oh, okay. On the flip side, though, there's the cringy moment where I had to listen. I mean, obviously, the worst thing you ever have to do is listen to yourself. And having to listen to myself do it, going like, oh gosh, why would I make that choice?
Yeah, I completely understand. I typically tend to focus on directing now, but when I do act, watching myself perform, it's so hard sometimes. So you admit hearing yourself. So you voiced some minor characters in Act 1. How did that come about? Did somebody ask you to do that?
So I have a theory. Yes, you asked me to do it. But I have a theory on how it happened. When Ryder's partner, we didn't get his audio in while I was doing his initial one. And you need to space things out. And I said, I'm just going to talk like my old drill sergeant, who has a very Hank Hill voice, or and moreover, I knew, because we've been friends for a long time, I knew you hated that voice.
I do.
And so I was just like, Ryder, can you believe it? We get, and I just did it just like out of a, why not? Like, it'll be funny for me. It was really just like funny for me. And so and we had talked, and you'd heard me do other voices, because I think you came in one time when I was teaching, and I was teaching 12 Angry Men, and I was doing 6 of the voices for it, and it was just 6 different characters. And so I guess the easiest way to ask one to do it is at least I know what all the leveling and everything should be. And so yeah, it's real easy. I played a cop a couple times, because that's real easy. Like, put on my sergeant voice and just yell. That one's really easy. You had me do a visitor, like a guy that wanted a picture.
Yeah, it's the Chris that gets his identity stolen. Just
right. And like, for whatever reason, I turned him real creepy.
Yeah.
And it was real, and I was like, and I had a different take of him where he was kind of more like a yeehaw cowboy, but it just didn't fit with the world that you created. And I was like, but somebody from a higher sector slumming it in Sector 5 might see it as kind of like a seedy guy in like a gentleman's club.
Right.
Like, hey man, let's do this. And I was like, so I went with that voice.
It worked. It worked wonderfully.
Yeah.
I remember you would be building an episode and shoot me an email and say, hey, I can't find these lines. Did you assign an actor to turn these in? Because we had these just kind of bit characters show up just to feel a little more fleshed out. And I realized I had never assigned that line to an actor, or they didn't turn it in on time. And so I didn't want to hold up the process. So I remember specifically emailing you and say, hey, would you mind recording that line for me? And then there were also some lines that you didn't have. And I was like, I can't ask him to do another one. So I'll send over this, because it's one character that shows up one time and says this one thing. And I just.
Yeah. And you went real, I think it was New Jersey with it.
Yeah,
it was either New Jersey or Boston. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that was in Cal's prologue.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular favorite character or Act 1 prologue now that the final cuts are out that you've watched?
Yeah. I didn't think so. What's weird about this is it was the one I least enjoyed. I least enjoyed recording it. I least enjoyed creating it, and the final proof and edit I least enjoyed, and it was Teo's.
Really?
It was the voice actor that played young Teo. Didn't say the line the same way as the adult actor playing Teo. And I remember just racking my brain how to mix it, because you can do amazing things with audio. You can stretch out, you can put pauses, you can line up, but nothing I did, because they said a different word, and they didn't have enough catalog to where I could just build the word from what they said to make it what they said. And I was just like, I don't know. And I remember telling you, like, the only thing I can do is have them cross over. And so she starts with a nomad, and then he finishes with whatever the rest of it is. And it was that one. And I just remember being like, that part always just bothered me. And then when I saw the final, I was like, oh, okay. I like this, but it was because his story worked so well, like him coming up rags to riches type thing. And when doing the audio for that, it was just like a lot of like, all right, I got to build a new background for this thing. I have to do. It was just more of like, oh, here's a bunch of another background work. Let me build this thing. Okay, he's just punching a wall. Okay, fine, punching. Okay, let me go find some chicken to punch. That is another thing. You asked about Foley work earlier. Most people will tell you the sound that people use is hamburger. They use steaks. I don't use steaks. I use chicken. And there's not like an artistic reason for me to do it. It is purely because my sister cannot eat red meat. Like, she physically can't digest red meat. So we don't have any chicken in that, or we don't have nothing but chicken and turkey in the house. And so I'm on like, am I going to go out and buy a stack of steaks just to beat the crap out of? No, I'm just going to use these chickens. And so it's like tenderizing some chicken. They're like, all right, this is what we're having for dinner. But also I found that, whole chickens, their bones break really, really easy. And it has a great human bone break quality, where if you get like a beef rib, it doesn't break with that same type of marrow sounding, because it is so different. And so I was like, oh, okay. So then that gave me this like, oh, I'm going to put a lot of bone breaking sound in here, just because like I have a really good chicken bone break.
Yeah. And as you were talking about the Act One prologues, I remember specifically recording those, and it was a slog, because those prologues, the actors that are in the room hardly interact with each other. So it's really just one person giving exposition dumps for 20 minutes, and then we would do a second take of it. And so that day in particular, I wondered if we were going to be able to get through everything. And then once the actors started interacting in the later episodes when they meet, then it was like, okay, now we can start to find our groove, and things were running a bit more smoothly. But I can't even imagine sitting at your recording station just listening to this exposition with additional characters. We just didn't have them,
right. Having to imagine like somebody's gonna cut them off here. And like there was the bit with Teo, once again, like when it just says in the script, it's that somebody came up to him and he just says, sorry, you're not my style, or you're not what I want, or something like that. And to me, there was absolutely nothing to that line. But then whenever, I see the instances that came up to it, that why that line was important. It was genius. But at the time, I'm just like, he's just shrugging off some girl in the cloud. Okay, like whatever. No, the thing with the prologue that was so interesting, you had the genius part about the prologue is that the last 4 or 5 minutes is the exact same in every one of them, but they're actually all different because they're from different point of views. Not the last minute is the same, but the minutes leading up to it are the same words. They're just from different points of view, so you level it differently. What I wish we would have done is twofold. I wish we would have, one, given our actor who played Emmett a stopwatch so he could count down to 10. And I wish we would have done it traditional style, where each person said their line separately, one at a time. You have them each do it 1 or 2 times individually, and then we call it, because then I could have built a perfect one. So what I did instead is we had 10 versions of or 11 versions of the ending scene, and I had to cherry pick from 11 different versions of every line.
Wow. And I remember in that closing scene, when it gets really chaotic and hectic, actors are talking over each other, were, almost cutting each other off abruptly. And so I'm sure that it was the ambient sound of it being picked up off of
Mhm.
8 microphones alone was just hard to kind of balance out.
Mhm.
So without going into too many spoilers, do you have a particularly favorite sound that you've created, or a sound effect or soundscape that you've built where you're like, this one, it's perfect, the way it lines up?
So sticking, because I don't want to get into any spoilers, I'll stick just with Act 1. Ryder's police car. Everything that went into that, the hovering sound, the sirens, the radio, the braking system that I came up with for hovering cars, which is just a series of hydraulic piston shooting. So it was like I wanted something that okay, what would a futuristic brakes that don't have wheels sound like? Well, it would need to be a negative pressure. So that came from Battlestar Galactica. Like when you see the ships moving, they have to keep moving, so they had the air release on the front to make them stop, and that's what went in my head. So it's things like that. So yeah, Ryder's police car. That's hands down my favorite thing in the prologue, in Act 1 to create.
Excellent. Well, Robert, it has been so great catching up with you and seeing you. Thank you so much for all of your hard work that you've put into and continue to put into this project. For those that are joining us, be sure to listen to all these wonderful sounds that Robert has created for you to hear. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.